Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Asher Marketing Podcast. I'm Anthony Giuliano, and my guest is Mike Cahill. Mike, how you doing?
I'm doing great, Anthony.
Well, thank you so much for being here. You and I go way back.
You know, we do. It's almost like every time I think about it, we go even further back.
Yeah. It's like an onion. You peel back the layer, and there's a Tower Bank layer, and there's another layer.
Right before that, and then you get a little bit nervous about going too far deep.
Yeah, we're not going to get in quite that deep today, but we will talk about some of that, and we're going to spend a lot of time on your new job. You have a new position as of January 1.
Absolutely. You're thinking of an old dog trying to learn a new trick here.
So were you trying to retire at some point?
I actually officially retired in September of 2020.
Okay.
And somebody asked how long you're retiring for, and I said, anywhere from 6 months to from now on.
All right. Okay.
I was perfectly comfortable with that.
Yeah.
And I got a call from the University of St. Francis about 9 months later.
Yeah.
Seeing if I wanted to be a professor over there.
Yeah.
And that was kind of like in between, right?
Yeah.
Not retired, but retired.
Sure.
And so I did that starting in the fall of 21.
Yeah.
And then I got an unusual text last summer that led me where I am today.
All right. So we will make that the cliffhanger part of the show. And we'll come back to that. But we want to start at the beginning and talk about your career path. You've had genuinely a very well-respected career path. You've done a lot of things. You've done them well. But let's talk about when you were deciding what you were going to do with your life. What did that look like, and how direct a path was that to the careers you pursued, or did you take a winding path along the way?
It's a great question. And the best way to start it out is when people say, talk about your career, I said, I have a collage. I don't have a career.
Yeah.
And then there was a gentleman, a great guy in town. His name's John Lovell. A lot of people know him.
Yeah.
Industrial psychologist. He said, Mike, you have a spiral path career.
Mm-hmm.
Luckily, he says it's usually spiraling up, not down.
Yeah.
But really, how it started out, I'm a bean counter out of the University of Notre Dame.
Mm-hmm.
And in many ways, how I became a bean counter talks about kind of how my career progressed.
Mm-hmm.
Because I didn't go to school to become an accountant.
Mm-hmm.
I went to school, wasn't sure what to do, didn't want to be an engineer.
Yep.
Went to the business school, and they just said, take a lot of accounting.
Mm-hmm.
So become an accountant.
Yeah.
So I did. And I graduated 210 people. 200 went into what was then the big 8 accounting firms.
Yeah.
I started working for Ernst & Young. Why?
Mm-hmm.
Because that's what you were supposed to do.
Yeah, sure.
That is all the thought I gave it.
Oh, yeah, for sure. I think a lot of people take that path. Yeah.
When I got there, great experience,
Mm-hmm.
but I got really interested in real estate.
Okay.
From clients, construction, real estate.
Yeah.
Got a call, Fort Wayne, Indiana, for a big developer here.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the best moves ever, I went to work for a gentleman by the name of Tom Eckridge.
Mm-hmm.
And Tom was my father's age.
Okay.
And I wasn't working directly for Tom.
Yeah.
But I had the opportunity to start working for Tom when I was 27, and he really changed my life, my view on life. He changed me from an accountant to more of a business person.
So what did he impart in you to the extent you can articulate that
Sure.
kind of changed that trajectory?
Number one, he forced me to go back and get additional education
Okay.
in different areas. That was one.
Mm-hmm.
Second, he introduced me and brought me along to all sorts of meetings with all sorts of people. It didn't matter if it was zoning,
Yep.
financing, personnel. It was just that overall exposure because he wanted to develop people.
Yeah. Well, I think only later, like now that I've gotten old, I realize what a gift that is because it takes logistical time and effort. It's a risk because hopefully the person doesn't reflect poorly on you when they're there next to you. So that's a great thing. And that was, where were you? What was the company you were working for?
It was called North Hill Development Corporation.
Yeah.
But here, for people here in town, they did stuff out of state too. But here in town, Canterbury Green Apartments, Stone Point Apartments, Arbor Lakes, Willows of Coventry, Point Emeritus office buildings, Sycamore Hill Subdivision, North Point Wood Subdivision. It was all things real estate when everything was kind of happening the first time in Fort Wayne back in the 80s.
Okay. All right. So you do that for how long? Then why do you decide to make a change?
Sure. I did that for about, I was there for a little over 5-6 years with Tom. He ran into some financial difficulties, which is actually how we got to be introduced. Mm-hmm. I did the work that showed him he was getting in trouble.
Okay.
Which, hey, here's the facts, and he was good about it.
Yeah. Well, he didn't shoot the messenger.
No,
clearly,
he did not.
So,
no, he really encouraged. I was in London, England, raising equity monies at age 27 with Tom Eckridge.
Wow.
Because of it. But I digress.
Yeah.
Went to work for but then Sturgis Griffin and Trent, now Sturgis Development.
Yep. Yeah.
In the 90s.
Mm-hmm.
and kind of kept on that path, a little bit more local, a little bit more rounded.
So this is commercial real estate.
And fortunately, they did a lot of hospital work back then. And in the 90s, the hospitals were buying physician practices. So I started doing valuing physician practices and their buildings and helping out what was back then Lutheran Local, Parkview Local, and Ancilla Systems, which back then was the parent of St. Joe, and started doing that all over northern Indiana.
Okay, yeah.
And of all the things, I saw an ad for PHP, Physicians Health Plan, was looking for a CFO. Caught my attention when I'm like, I'm a real estate guy, I'm a finance guy, that's not me.
Yeah.
I had 3 or 4 friends call me and said, Mike, did you see that ad? Did you see it?
Yeah.
And that's how old I am.
Sometimes
it's an ad in the paper I saw.
Yeah. Sometimes the universe taps you on the shoulder. Yeah.
And I applied, and I became chief financial officer of PHP. Really got me involved in health insurance in general. Great experience. And once again, the gentleman I worked for, his name was Jay Gilbert. He was the CEO. He developed me. He had me represent PHP on all the industry things in the country, et cetera. Awesome experience. Went off, was a consultant, decided to take the risk to be a consultant, had a couple of clients lined up. It was going so well that I was busy all the time, working about 80 hours a week.
Yeah.
When out of the blue, I get a call from a gentleman by the name of Don Schenkel.
So we haven't even gotten to banking yet.
No.
We're going to get to banking.
We're going to get to banking.
Okay.
And Don Schenkel and I worked for Tom Eckridge back in the 80s. And he was the CEO of Tower Bank here in town. And he calls me and says, Mike, would you be interested in being CFO at Tower Bank?
Yeah.
And I'm sitting there going, local company. I've been CFO before. I was publicly traded. And I've always been fascinated with the bank because I've been the borrower, right?
Sure.
I've been the professional borrower.
Yeah.
So I said,
definitely better to be the entity with money than the borrower.
Payrolls, I can see payroll. Beautiful thing.
Yeah.
And actually, there's a funny story about this. When I was going to do it, I was talking to my wife about it. I said, I got to do this, but I don't know what's going to happen to the bank. She goes, well, what if the bank sells? What if something happens? What are you going to do? And I said, well, look who's on the board. I said, you know what? If I go in there and I do a good job, no matter what happens, I'm going to be set here in town.
Yeah.
But because she's my spouse and she knows me, she goes, yeah, but what if you suck? I go, we'll have to move.
Yeah. Like I said, sometimes the universe taps you on your shoulder. Sometimes it's your wife. Yeah.
Many times.
Yeah.
But I'll tell you what, the bank was really kind of a culmination for me because community banks, about a third of all the loans in community banks are real estate related. And I was a professional borrower on the real estate side for a long, long time. So that was super helpful. And I had been on a lot of foundation boards, investment committees. So the rest of the bank is how do you invest your monies, et cetera. So it really kind of brought things together. And I was there for 10 years. And to tell the truth, if they had not sold the bank, I'd still be sitting there.
Yeah. And you were eventually CEO out of the CFO seat.
Yeah, I started as CFO. Within 2 years, I was CEO of the main subsidiary. And 2 years later, I was CEO of the whole corporation. Matter of fact, I used to joke, back then when it was IPFW, I used to go speak to their society, and they always ask, how do you become president of a bank? And I used to tell them, I go, apparently don't work for one as long as possible. And that seemed to do the trick. But what it all along the way, what it did for me was it showed me that you had to surround yourself with people that knew things that you didn't know. Because let's face it, I'm at the bank 2 years. I'm CEO of the main subsidiary. It doesn't make me an expert in anything.
Oh, sure.
And I was lucky. Tom Eckridge, Don Schenkel, Jay Gilbert, all lived that.
Yeah.
And they showed me that.
Yeah.
And it allowed me to become successful in that realm.
Yeah. So Tower Bank is sold.
Yes.
And then you have a pivot at that point. What does that look like for you?
It was an unusual pivot.
Yeah.
Just because 2 days before the official sale of Tower to Old National, all smooth, Centier Bank asked me to get on their board.
Yeah.
And so I had to get approval from Tower and Old National to get on Centier's board because they're out of Maryville. They weren't here local, et cetera. And I had a non-compete agreement for 2 years. So I became the CEO of the AWS Foundation, their first
So
CEO.
tapping into that experience you had serving on boards. Yep.
And I'd been involved with them all along. And the idea back then was I was going to really get AWS Foundation started up and, hey, maybe that's the right thing for me. Or at the very least, let's get it going.
Yep.
It would burn off my non-compete. And then I was going to become possibly the president of Centier Bank.
Okay.
That was the plan.
And everybody was aware of that when you started with the AWS Foundation. Okay.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
and we'll just see how it plays out.
Yeah.
And by chance, time goes on. I'm kind of watching Centaur, great folks, don't get me wrong. But my son's still a senior in high school, and I didn't really want to move.
Yeah.
And lo and behold, I get a call from PHP. And they had been on some tougher times for a while, and they really are coming up short with a CEO.
Yep.
And they reached out, and next thing you know, I am the CEO of PHP.
Yeah.
Kind of back to the beginning. Great group of people, and take those lessons that you learn. Right, you have great people. You get them direction. You give them the resources, and they did a phenomenal job. 17 and 18 were record years.
Yeah. Yeah.
For PHP, great folks, and once again, that's where I was going to retire from.
Yeah.
And then I get a call from Mark Music at Ruoff.
Yeah.
And Mark was interested in either becoming a bank, starting a bank, something in banking. And for 7 months, I told him no, I wouldn't join him, but I was more than happy to help him, and was helping him.
Sure.
And if anyone gets to know Mark, remarkable individual, incredibly focused, and a sponge learning things. And he, as my wife said, he caught me in a weak moment. I chuckle about that, but I decided to join him.
Yeah.
And let's get this bank going. So I had to resign from the Centaur board. They were really thrilled with me for that.
Yeah.
I had to leave PHP.
Yeah.
They were really thrilled with me for that. But Mark and his group and some people that joined me, we were the first mortgage banking group allowed to get a bank chartered in the United States since 2011.
Oh, wow.
Which tells you what they thought of Mark and his organization.
Yeah, for sure.
And the board that
and what they
created.
thought about everybody else in the industry. Yeah.
You know, sometimes I look better by comparison.
You and me both. Yeah.
Overall. But I understand, but Mark at the last minute, just that, he couldn't do it. And he goes, "Are you mad?" And I go, "Mad's not the right." I said, "I'm disappointed, of course, because that's what I came here to do. But Mark, you got to sleep at night."
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's your company.
Oh, sure.
If I can't sleep at night.
Well, and I'm sure that in a way, you might not have learned more than you would have had it gone through, but you definitely learned some things that were beneficial.
Yeah, and I think that's the key. If you kind of look at the whole thing, that was a startup. So I learned the startup of the bank. I had to actually go all the way to D.C. and meet with the FDIC chairman. So that was key. I went to Tower Bank 5 years in, so growing it, and they had some trouble, so I had to go through that. So it really did come full circle for me.
Yeah.
But from there, I was going to retire then from Ruoff. But I was on a board of Gibson Insurance, a big insurance agency out of South Bend. Other offices, Indy, Fort Wayne, Kalamazoo, Grand Rapids. And they were going through some changes. Their CFO had moved on. They had lost some other people. They really not gotten the Fort Wayne market going. So they asked me if I'd kind of come in on an interim basis, be CFO, get them squared away, and get the market going here. So sure.
Yep.
I'll do it.
Yep.
Got it done. 9 months later, I did retire.
Yeah. Okay. And how long did that last?
Well, like I said, I was truly retired until the following August.
Okay.
And that's when I started teaching.
So that was a step back into some kind of predictable work, but it's not full-time. It's basically...
I hate to say this because I don't want to upset faculty members out there, but I described it as 24/7.
Yeah.
24 hours a week, 7 months a year.
Yeah, that's not bad. Not bad work.
No,
you could get it.
It was good.
Yeah. So what was that experience like? Because you taught before. I know you were graciously a guest speaker at a class that I taught, and you did some of that. But did you ever teach classes?
I had been an adjunct for a class 2 different semesters many years ago.
Yeah.
And it intrigued me. As you know, Anthony, we were on the board, trustees over at Indiana Tech, and I was very involved in Butler University in an advisory board. And a lot of things, as you know, going on in higher ed, and I was just fascinated. So I thought, you know what? It gives me a chance to connect with students. I always like that. That's kind of fun.
Oh, yeah.
And maybe get a better feel for what's going on in the university world.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I mean, I enjoyed it. I teach, but it's more on the non-credit side now. But it definitely keeps you young in a way that sounds like a cliche, but it's absolutely true. And it is the most difficult from a public speaking standpoint. The most difficult audience you are ever in front of is a group of college students, because they do not take any BS. If you do not know your stuff, they will call you on it every single time.
Oh, Absolutely. And then the other, since COVID, when they used online, you better make it worth their while to actually show up.
Absolutely. Yeah.
At the end of the day.
Yeah. All right. So you teach for a spell, and then what comes next?
Yeah, I'm sitting there. It's in the summer. I'm in great shape now. I've had 2 summers off, 3 summers off, and I get a text message from the managing partner at BKD or Forvis now, and it just says, "Are you interested in becoming a bank CEO?" And I responded, "Not really."
Yeah.
And then he goes, "What are your objections?" I said, I'm not moving. "Oh, you don't have to." And I said, "I am not fixing another company. I'm done."
Yeah.
He goes, "Oh, no, don't have to fix it."
Yeah.
I said, "Well, they have to have the capital."
What's the catch? Yeah.
They got to have the capital to grow. And he goes, "They just converted and went public." Okay.
Yeah.
And I agreed to go meet with the board members. And you are the 5 people you surround yourself with. And there's 5 board members. And they are the most dynamic group of individuals. And keep in mind, if I went through who the board members at Tower were, those are really dynamic individuals.
Sure.
But these 5 are not only dynamic individuals, but working partners, friends, interested in the community, all these things, contagious. And they really sat there and said, "Mike, we want to convert from being a thrift, kind of like a savings loan, to be a regional commercial bank. And we're looking for you to get us that underpinning, that foundation, and get us in place." And they bought 33% of the bank as part of that public raise.
Wow. Okay.
And the rest, and the cool thing about the bank is it was a mutual, which is kind of like the credit union of banks. I don't mean that in a bad way, but it was basically run for the basic benefit of the depositors. The shareholders in a conversion are the depositors get first shot.
Okay.
So basically you have a Van Wert community-owned bank and friends and family that wanted to become a regional commercial bank because they wanted it to last.
Yeah. Yeah. So you have the commitment from.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
And so suddenly I felt like I was 25 versus 62.
Yeah. So I'm gonna take a path and then we'll come back. But
sure.
All this time you live in Fort Wayne, correct?
Correct.
And you're in Fort Wayne when Fort Wayne is not what Fort Wayne is today.
Absolutely.
What keeps you here? Is it that you have young kids? Is it the people you met? Is it the jobs you had? Is it all of those things, or is it something else?
There's a couple themes in there. Just as I grew up, I lived in 7 different cities. And so when someone says, "Where's your hometown?" I go, "I kind of know where my furniture might be."
Yeah.
But so it was really important for me, for my kids, to do the best I could to have them live and grow up in the same town. So that was a big piece of it. But you're right. When I came to Fort Wayne, it was 1985.
Yeah.
And Fort Wayne, there was the flood. Harvester had left. GM had just come in. But this gentleman I work for, Tom Eckridge, Fort Wayne went through a renaissance in the 80s, late 80s into the 90s. And people don't realize this because they kind of forget it.
Yeah.
Inc. magazine, we were in the top 10 cities in the United States in the 80s.
Oh, really?
With Inc. magazine. And something happened. And I was too young or too naive. Something happened in the 90s and into 2000. My gut's this. A lot of the big movers and shakers, like an Ian Rowland, a Dick Dormer, were attached to corporations. And those corporations sold and moved.
Yeah.
And I think we lost some of that, but something hit me. Tom Eckridge told me this way back when. He goes, "Give me 5 entrepreneurs, and I can change the face of a city." So think about Fort Wayne, what's happened in the 2000s.
Yep.
The Sweetwaters, the Fort Wayne Meadows, the Ruoffs. I mean, I go on and on, right? Steel Dynamics. Those are 3 entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
It completely changed. And so what people see going on right now, I used to get excited about that in Fort Wayne in the 80s.
Yeah. Wow.
And so for me, it's kind of like the double pump. And actually what I worry about, I want to get those next players.
Yeah.
Who are those people in their late 30s, 40s? They're going to be the next generation.
Yeah.
And so that excitement's almost kind of built for me, and that's what's kept me here.
Yeah, well, that's a really interesting perspective, and I hadn't heard it because everything that I've heard, and I moved to Northeast Indiana relatively later than you. It was like the late 1990s, and everything I've heard is, well, it started with Parkview Field, but it sounds like it was an evolution that had, about a decade headwind at least prior to that, maybe a couple decades.
Yeah, like I said, I was not here when things went south.
Yeah.
But I was there for the first ascension.
Yeah.
and that'll call the malaise of loss of leadership.
Yeah.
And then it catches fire. And I give a lot of people, it was the regional partnership,
Yeah.
Greater Fort Wayne, although it was a lot of people from whether it be government, quasi-economic, corporate,
Yeah.
really getting together and pulling together.
Yeah.
Kudos to them. I got to ride the coattails.
Yeah.
I was not part of making it happen.
Yeah, well, you're probably not going to accept this compliment, but you were part of that, being an executive who stayed in town, and there was some continuity in your relationships, and that helped build Fort Wayne into what it is. Hopefully, you'll see some of that. Or
checks in the mail, Abe. Checks in the mail.
All right, so enough hagiography of Mike Cahill. Let's move on to where you are now. So
Sure.
the organization you're working for, Van Wert Federal Savings Bank.
That's right, mouthful.
Yeah, a little bit. Tell me what it's all about, why you're excited to be part of it, and what your, to the extent you can share things
Sure.
that aren't proprietary, what your plans are for getting your role off the ground.
Sure, and I'll share everything. I always laugh about this. People say, "Oh, why would you share your strategy?" I'm like, you can share strategy all you want. You got to execute on it.
Yeah,
So
for sure.
really, what we're about, the way I've described it to our board is this: we are starting up a commercial bank from scratch, and we are integrating a long-standing thrift of the Van Wert market. They've been there since 1889. Into the commercial bank. We want to keep doing what we're doing in Van Wert and actually expand from there.
Yeah.
And create a commercial regional bank all at the same time. That's my charge over the next 5 years, and that's what we're going to do.
Yeah.
And what am I really excited about is if you can't dominate your hometown, and I'll give kudos to Lake City Bank. If you go to Warsaw, Indiana, they have a 50% deposit market share.
Really? Yeah.
A First Merchants Bank, Muncie, they have a 40% in Muncie market share. I want Van Wert Federal Savings Bank to be that dominant a bank in Van Wert County because it's good for the county.
Yeah.
If you don't have financial institutions making the decisions there, it's not going to happen.
Sure.
And I really think that what's happened in the Fort Wayne market is we have plenty of fine banks, fine bankers, but everyone's getting bigger again. And so suddenly, are you going to be able to see the president of a bank when you want a $500,000 loan?
Yeah.
$1 million loan? A $3 million loan? Probably not. I mean, you're going to have to go through committees and everything. And don't get me wrong. That's not a knock on anybody, but there's a gap now.
Oh, sure.
And when I talk about those entrepreneurs and the startups and where you can really make a connection where who you are matters, not what you look like on a piece of paper in a committee meeting, I think there's an opportunity again.
Yeah, well, and that's always been the biggest point of difference in Fort Wayne, in my experience, is the accessibility of people. I always say this kind of jokingly that when I moved to Fort Wayne, not because I'm anything special, but just because of how the city is, there were multiple times where the mayor held the door open for me walking in somewhere. In Massachusetts, where I grew up, there were people whose full-time job was keeping people like me away from the mayor. Yep. So you don't want to lose that. And I'm sure, it's a strength in Van Wert County, too, is that connectivity and that accessibility of people.
Oh, absolutely. And, in many the board in Van Wert, I kind of joke is, if you stay in one town and get old, it's amazing the connectivity. And I don't know about you, whenever I get on a plane coming back to Fort Wayne, I expect to know everyone on the plane.
Pretty much. Yeah.
I always know somebody.
Yeah.
And it's the big small town.
Yeah.
And it's 35 miles from downtown Van Wert to downtown Fort Wayne.
Yeah. Well, it's someone that you and I have as a friend in common, Adam Bartram. We had breakfast this morning. And I said to Bartram, "Oh, you're seeing it. You've hung around and now you're getting old and good things are happening." And I said to him, "It helps that you've got some gray around your temples now because now you're a sage, old person."
My problem is, I got to the gray stage. Now it's just leaving. The hair is going. It's so sad.
Well, that's when you become the Buddha.
Yeah,
so then it's an upgrade. Yeah.
But it's funny. There's a gentleman in town, just a wonderful gentleman. His name's Don Schenkel.
Yeah.
And I remember when he started Tower, he was 58 or 59. And at the time, I went to Don and said, that makes sense. Instead of 6 degrees of separation, it's like 1.1 for Don.
Yeah.
Because I'm sure there's somebody who doesn't know. I don't know who they are.
Yeah.
But, you get to that same age and stage, and it's like, I tease Don now. It wasn't all that impressive, Don. Now I get it. But it's an important piece. Let's face it, at the end of the day, access to capital.
Oh, sure.
and confidence and kind of keeping things
and
close
access
the
to
vest.
influence. People who can,
Help.
make stuff move, even if they're not, if they don't have the biggest bank account. People who can influence those who do.
Or just a lot of times, who can I get you introduced to that's going to help you?
Correct. Yeah.
And that's kind of fun.
Yeah. Oh, for sure.
just a lot
For
of
sure.
fun.
And it's one of my favorite things to do. And it's one of the easiest things I do.
Oh.
Here's someone you don't know. Good luck.
Yeah, everybody goes, how'd you do that? I go, I typed an email for 30 seconds. It was really tough.
Yeah. So this is the Asher Marketing Podcast.
Yes.
So I want to throw out a marketing question. What is your plan, to the extent that you can share it, to build the name in the markets where you want to become known?
No, it's kind of a tiered process. So it's going to start out because you're going to be known by your banker.
Yeah, sure.
It's not.
Sure.
It's not going to be. You're not going to go to. It's not like we're Chase.
Yeah.
You're going to go to see Mike Cahill. Just hired a young man from Premier Bank, Tyler Mason. You know Mike. You know Tyler. You know the board members. That's how it's going to start.
Yep. So still a relationship business.
Definitely a relationship. Then we're really kind of, which a lot of this is your influence. You got me started on this 12, 15 years ago. Social media. It's amazing what a following you can build up
Yeah.
from that a little bit as you go.
You still have to do the real world stuff.
Still got to do the real world stuff. Get involved in the community, make people aware, and actually help. What I would say is, I want the customer or the client to call me first, whether it's for a movie recommendation.
Yeah.
Do you know a good insurance agent?
Yeah.
I just want to be seen as that community
yeah.
resource
Yeah.
and reach out that way when it's all said and done. And at the level we're going to be at, once you get to, and this is very, very rough, once you're borrowing more than $5, $6, $7 million, you have the financial people in your organization. All I am is money in a vault. My rate is my only differentiator.
Yeah. Yeah.
Below that, I've been in their seat. I've been the CFO. I've been the controller. I've been the CEO. On the other side, I can offer you advice, connections, ways to go about doing things that make a big difference. And that's kind of the space we can be in up until we get to probably about $1 billion. And we're at 150 million right now. So we got some runway.
So I'm going to ask this question as respectfully as I can answer it, but you've been retired. So, as someone who is in the ballpark of retirement age, is part of the task kind of grooming that next generation that's going to step into your shoes and move things forward?
Absolutely. And kind of address that on both ends.
Yeah.
What I found when I retired
Yeah.
was that the people my wife and I naturally have been hanging around with had kids the same age as ours. And because my wife and I are such great planners, I have a 38-year-old and a 22-year-old and two in between that. And so my 22-year-old, his parents, who we've been hanging around with for years, right, are 54, 55. They're not going to retire for another 5 to 10 years.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I want to stay at it. But my goal is exactly what you said. I want to groom the next generation of leaders. I want to bring them in, develop them, get them groomed. I could tease the folks at Tower.
Yeah.
Because the people at Tower are in influential
I was going to say,
positions all
you can
over.
see those tentacles kind of in the community.
And I tease them all because they're probably on the young side.
Yeah.
They might be late 30s. Old side, they might be 50. And I kind of said, I want to do Tower again, only you guys are way too old, so I'm going to get some new people.
Well, how are you? So there's a temptation for someone as well connected as you are to just kind of go back to the well. Here's the people I know. How are you guarding against that and being open to people you don't know who might bring in a new perspective?
This is anyone listening on the HR side, don't pay attention to this stuff. My joke is if you're 40, you're dead. But no, what I've really tried to do is go to the people that I used to work with and ask them for the up-and-comers, young people that they know. It's actually how I found Tyler. Tyler worked with my son who had worked with some folks. He'd worked for some folks at Centier Bank and the Credit, and I located where he was at.
Yeah.
And what I basically said is, I can have a few, not like me, but maybe within 10 years of my age.
Yeah.
But what I'm really looking for is people in their late 20s into their late 30s that they're going to take us someplace.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I want to make sure there's a wide open field because what I said before, I was raising equity for a U.S. developer at age 27, and not because I deserved to be, but getting those opportunities. I had an HR person once said, Mike, I'm at the age where I'm trying to get stuff. You're at the age trying to hang on to stuff. I want a bunch of people that want to get stuff.
Yeah, for sure, for sure.
And so that's my protection.
It sounds like it's kind of come full circle, right? You're in the position that the Eckridges and the Schenkels were when you were getting started.
Yeah, and it's kind of it's a lot of fun to kind of pay it back that way.
Yeah.
And remember what I said about the community. If you don't keep cultivating, you'll get that lull.
Yeah, for sure.
And we can't have that lull.
Yeah.
So 5 years from now, I plan on annoying them by being a board member.
Yeah.
And I'll go get fat on a beach somewhere. I don't know. We'll see.
So how are you tapping into, because you've got a lot of interests, you have a lot of experience. You're obviously putting a lot of your resources into what's happening at the bank. But how are you keeping involved in other things? If you are, maybe you're saying, no, I was retired a little while ago. I don't want to be involved in other things.
No, it's when I retired, I was on 9 boards and I was the chair of 4.
Jeez.
And reinventing the word no was good. So I really spent the next year getting off of boards and finishing out my commitments. So I could kind of figure out what's next. And I think where I'm at next, and I did this at some organizations, is I don't necessarily need to be on that board, but I want to help those organizations locate the best board members and help people in those organizations get the connections they need.
You want to answer the phone, you don't want to go to the meeting.
Right.
Yeah.
And so that's where I think I'm at right now.
Yeah.
And it makes sense. So overall, if you think about it, is as I'm bringing these younger folks on, they can go sit on those boards and do those things.
Yeah.
And I think it does everybody a favor.
Yeah. Well, and it helps them build relationships. It helps them kind of become known for what they want to be known for. And you can be efficient in how you're sharing what you know.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You said it better than I did. Maybe I should start asking questions and you answer for me.
No, we're not going to do that at all. That's why I do this. All right. Well, let's pivot to a few more quick hit questions.
Sure.
Let's talk about careers. And you've kind of alluded to some good advice. But what do you think is most important for folks who are looking to be successful in their career, fulfilled in their career? What have you learned that you think is worth passing on?
Well, one thing just always comes to my mind, and I never planned it this way, is the elevation of my career came across every time there was a crisis. Everyone loves tremendous growth. Everyone wants to get into the bandwagon. Hey, that's great. But you know what? No one runs into the burning building. There's no competition going into the burning building. And you will learn an incredible amount. You will be given amazing opportunities out of that, and you'll make bigger connections and a bigger impression on people. And I'll share a story that came out of this is, for people that remember the name Ian Rowland, longtime chairman CEO of Lincoln. When I became the CEO at AWS, he was a very influential board member, as you can imagine. And I went to Ian, I said, is it because of my time at Tower as CEO that, you said this is okay? He goes, Mike, I remember when you were 28 and on a task force with me at the chamber, and you're the only one who did anything. So I bring that up just because, you know what? You don't have to be CEO. I made impressions on people at 25, 28, 30 because I took a risk. I got involved. I pushed forward. That's my message.
Yeah. Well, no, I think that's great. And, when you think of people who aspire to be in leadership, and that term is kind of overused today, but people who aspire to leadership, they kind of wait for someone to give them permission to lead. It's like, no, do it in the job you're doing now. That's how you get there, is you demonstrate the ability by not really asking permission, not stepping on toes, but just doing things that demonstrate your leadership capacity. Then people go, oh, that person has the ability to do it for this organization.
Go back to in the 80s when I became CFO of a $1 billion real estate company. It's because I was watching cash flows in all these entities. And on my own, I just started to just do cash flows in them all. And I put up 70 entities, put it all together, and like, oh, he's going to run out of money in 18 months. He might want to know that. And I showed my boss. He goes, oh, that's interesting. Why don't you show my boss? So I showed him. And then they go, why don't you show Tom?
And they said, run into the burning building.
Right. And I showed Tom, and I'm like, and to Tom, he's like, we should talk. So take that, like you said, take the risk, right? Don't ask for permission, right? It's paid off. Many times.
All right. So next quick hit question. You can take this one wherever you want to go with it. But what is a myth or misconception about some of the work you've done? It could be banking. It could be being a CEO. It could be, what's a myth or misconception you want to clear up?
I scare people just because, well, you've had so many jobs and you've been in so many industries.
You're like one of those millennials.
I actually gave a talk years ago. It was called Fort Wayne's Oldest Millennials. But what I wanted them to see, and I'll start with a story. I was at a bank. I was at Tower, and it was during the Great Recession, and I was with a banker, one of my lenders, and he's like, "Oh, I'm really nervous, Mike." And I'm like, "Well, what?" He goes, "Well, I've been a banker all my life. What am I going to do?" And I said, "Well, you're expert in this, and the other thing." He goes, "Well, you don't have to worry about it. You're not a banker." It's a mindset. But if you think about it, everything I've been involved in has been the financial services industry.
Yeah.
Real estate is a financial product. Insurance is a financial product. Banking's a financial product.
Even foundation work.
So there's a theme there.
Yeah.
And it also comes back to, we can use the word leadership. I don't necessarily like that term, but it is, you coalesce a team and you kind of present a vision to the team and allow them to make something happen.
Yeah.
That you can do in any industry. And and in most industries, the game is not that difficult.
Yeah.
Executing it is, don't get me wrong.
Sure.
Insurance, what's the game? Well, I probably should charge more than I pay out in claims and expenses. That makes sense. Banking, I probably should earn more on loans than I pay on deposits and overhead. Yeah, that might work.
Yeah.
It sounds silly.
Sure.
But I think we make things more complex.
Yeah. Well, everybody knows how to lose weight, right?
Yeah, and it keeps people from trying. People are so afraid.
Yeah. Yeah.
Don't be afraid.
Well, and some of it too, and I've seen this, I think, from a distance with the people you've surrounded yourself with. It's surrounding yourself with people who have different personalities than you do. The person who comes to mind who I think you are long connected to is Greg Stetner.
Yep.
Greg is a quiet, deliberate, very thoughtful, very smart guy.
The exact opposite of me.
But this podcast would have been over 20 minutes ago.
Yes.
Because he is more deliberate and takes his time. But I think it really takes a little bit of courage to say, this person isn't like me. They bring skills I don't have, and I'm going to give them a seat at the table. Yeah,
absolutely. And Jay Gilbert gave me that opportunity at PHP. And this, I think subliminally we always say, hire people smarter than you, but we don't. But I went to PHP as CFO, and I had an actuary working for me, an underwriter working for me, the marketing person. I'm like going, you know what? I'm not going to be an actuary. I'm not going to get 20 years worth of underwriting experience.
Yeah.
They have to be smarter than me. And it forced me to do it.
Yeah.
And there was no looking back after that.
Okay. So one last question. And this doesn't have to be a tech tool, but what is something you use in your work? It could be a trick, a hack, a tool that is important to you that helps you be productive, efficient, effective, whatever you're going to call it. It could be something super obvious that you just think deserves another mention, or it could be something that people should know about.
And this is nothing all that tricky. And this goes back to something I alluded to earlier. You helped me start to understand the use of social media for business. And what works for me was LinkedIn. And through yourself and a couple other people, I've kind of followed someone, and it's developed quite a following. And not many people on LinkedIn put out product, and they don't have a strategy to what they put out there. And just this will be a humble brag, but when I announced on LinkedIn that I was going to Van Wert Federal Savings Bank, right now I have 26,000 views.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Nothing special about me.
Yeah.
But what I did is I put it on my app, on my phone, and I like to be early for meetings.
Yeah.
So I have time to like things, truly comment on things, know what's going on.
Yeah.
And it really allows one to take that network and keep it in real time.
Yeah.
And it's not just how many people can connect with.
Yeah.
But I'm talking about a true personal connection, not just.
Yeah. Well, and it's something I think I've told you this, but I've used you as an example in LinkedIn classes that I've taught of someone who you don't spend a lot, this is no offense, but you don't spend a ton of time creating content. It's like, hey, here's a quote. I like it. Here's why. And you're in and out of it in maybe 2 minutes.
Yep.
But you're there every day. Right.
And there's a theme behind the things I post. And as a matter of fact, you did one once, and it can be kind of funny. I remember one time someone was out in the Federal Reserve.
Yeah.
And I posted and put the comment above it was, duh.
Yeah.
Right? But it draws people in and allows people to comment.
Yeah.
As opposed to just a brochure.
Yeah, for sure. And it's done with it as a means to an end.
Absolutely.
It is. I want this to be a nice positive bump with the people I have a real world connection with. So the next time we get together, they feel better about the relationship or they have a jumping off point for a conversation.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's part of a conversation.
Yeah, for sure. Well, good luck in your new role.
I'll need it.
We all will. But it's really great talking to you. We started this out by saying we wanted it to just sound like a conversation we were having, and I think we did that.
Yeah, me too. We just need to have some beverages in front of us. But,
well, maybe next time.
Sounds good.
Thank you very much. Thanks for doing it.
Hey, thanks for having me, Anthony. Appreciate it.
And thanks to everyone who took the opportunity to listen to this episode of the Asher Marketing Podcast. We'll be back next time with another great guest, and we hope you'll join us then.